My name is Uwe Brandt. I'm the academic chair for the petroleum portfolio here at SAIT. I'd like to welcome everyone to the First Nations and Indigenous Engagement event here, which is part of the SPE ESG series. This is the fourth in a series of four, and I'm very proud to open this for you. Before we get going, I'd like to do an acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that SAIT is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. The city of Calgary encompasses a region that the Blackfoot tribes of southern Alberta describe as Mokistis, meaning elbow, in reference to the location of the Elbow and Bow rivers. Since time immemorial, this region was a traditional gathering place for tribes of the Blackfoot Confederacy. We are meeting or gathering on these traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which today encompasses Indigenous peoples of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, the Siksika, Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, as well as the Northwest Métis Homeland Region 3. The purpose of the SPE ESG meeting is to essentially further energy literacy as we prepare for energy transition into the years and decades to come. Today's events will provide a platform for presenters from Cenovus, Water Movement, Project Reconciliation, and Precision Drilling. And the speakers from these organizations will speak about how they are exemplifying collaboration in Indigenous engagement. Collaborating with rights holders is a critical component of the energy transition, and it's a critical component of SAIT's mandate to position future young professionals as they progress into industry and continue to evolve how the energy industry transforms, ultimately transforming in a good way. I'd like to turn it now over to Beta, who's our moderator for today's event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for the land acknowledgement. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joining our panelists today. We have an incredible presentation lined up for you guys, and thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. So just some housekeeping items. This session will be recorded and found later on SPE Calgary's YouTube channel. So in case you want to rewatch or relearn anything, you can find the video there. All attendees' microphones and videos are automatically muted and off for the duration of the webinar. If you would like to connect and ask questions, feel free to use the QA chat box throughout the entire webinar, and we'll answer the questions at the end. Students, make sure to stick around till the very end. We do have some new job opportunities we'd like to share with you, especially if you're interested in working in the oil and gas sector. And the theme of this session will start with a quick intro on our panelists, and then each presenter will be given 10 minutes to talk about their organizations. So with me, I'm joined with Jeff Lewis. He's the Director of Indigenous Engagement at Precision Drilling, Aditya Chowdhury, an ambassador with Water Movement, Trent Zacharias, the Director of Community and Indigenous Affairs at Cenovus, and Warren McPhail, the Project Reconciliation at EVP Engineering. So I'm very, very excited to have all these panelists with us today. So I will give a more detailed kind of background on Jeff. He's going to be the first person giving us the presentation. So Jeff has over 20 years of experience in the oil field services, and he's worked in various roles, including working in drilling rigs, sales, operations, and management throughout North America, Middle East, South Asia, and Australia. He currently holds the Director of Indigenous Engagement at Precision Drilling, and he spearheads the activities required to engage the communities in which Precision Drilling provides services to, including supporting First Nations, and ultimately striving towards conservation of the lands and further economic development. So without further ado, Jeff, feel free to share your screen. And remember, we're trying to cap all presentations at 10 minutes.
Thanks, Beta. Screen shared.
Looks like it's just loading. We'll give it a few more minutes.
You're muted there, Beta, but I'm going to assume that my presentation is up.
No, it's not up. Can you try screen sharing one more time? There we go. It's just loading and we can see it now. Go ahead.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Apologize for that technical difficulty. Real quick, I just want to thank the SBE for the invite and thank you for the opportunity to speak specifically to what precision drilling is doing as far as First Nations and Indigenous engagement. I'm fully cognizant of the 10 minutes that's provided to me. So just jumping right into it, following that introduction, that was the first 30 seconds of my presentation, so I don't think I have to get into that. But inside of these varying roles inside of precision drilling, I was resident of the UAE, United Arab Emirates in Dubai for 3 years, which the reason I bring that up, it was a real good experience for me. And what that brought about for me was the cultural sensitivity and awareness that is required anywhere globally on this planet that is required to operate inside this industry. And so with that, inside my 20 years, also, as was mentioned, I did finish an MBA with a thesis on precision drilling and First Nation relationships. So that provided me the opportunity to further my studies and to become a little bit more aware of what is going on inside of this country, specifically with the cultural sensitivity. So what I'm going to do, with this 10 minutes, I understand time is pressing, and what I'm going to do is just try to give an overview of precision drilling, our strategic approach to what we're doing inside of providing these oil field services, and just try to refine the presentation down and the narrowing down of the thought process that goes towards the aspect of Indigenous engagement inside of our operation. So firstly, next slide, being just our vision from the top down. It's a high performance, high value vision, which is ultimately based on premium people, systems, and equipment. So the recruitment and training of the best people in the world, the development and implementation of premium systems, and the design and build of hopefully the best equipment that we can field, employ, and really put to work for our customers throughout the country. Breaking down our vision into our corporate strategies, just reading verbatim for inside of our corporate and competitive strategies right here on the slide, that we strongly believe in investing in employee-driven community initiatives, supporting the youth, culture, and employees, and the customers, especially where we work. So we're fully cognizant of the communities in which we work. And then in the third bullet point inside of this screen, we do have our principles, our values, and our rules, which guide our behaviors and our decisions every day inside of our operations. So again, from vision to our strategies into our rules that guide what we're doing. Again, I'm just trying to refine the presentation down to what we're doing. Next slide, inside of our strategic approach to our business is our sustainability piece. It's important that inside of this top bullet point on this slide, we do mention all stakeholders, being our customers, vendors, shareholders, employees, and the communities in which we work, again, and they're involved in everything we do. Breaking it down a little further into the ESG component of our sustainability. Obviously, this is what this series is based on. And I think the big touch points, the big words inside this bullet point are our ethics, diversity, safety, and environment. We continue to break it down into a little bit further into the community aspect of our sustainability. we're fully cognizant, no matter where we work, any province in Canada, any state in the US, again, we can be in the Middle East, in Kuwait, in Saudi, we're fully mindful of the diversity and the cultures that we'll meet every day inside of our operation. And obviously, as soon as we get into Canada, in large part throughout the country, this is where our Indigenous partners start to come in into the strategic approach of what we're doing. So now that we're at the point of Indigenous initiatives, we understand that no matter what region we're going to be going into, the wants and needs may vary from region to region. And what we do understand is that when we do provide our oil field services, it's very important that we're going to need to listen to the communities. We're going to have to listen to the members. We're going to have to listen and coexist when we provide our services to the E&Ps that employ us. So what we're seeing here now in the last bullet point is that we've come a little bit full circle where we've gone from our vision to our corporate strategy. And in the first sentence of the last bullet point of Indigenous initiatives, that the Indigenous engagement is a crucial step in the future of our corporation's strategic direction. So just moving on to our next slide. First bullet point up in the top left corner, our main objectives that guide our social initiatives. We do notice the words there, preserving the lands. That's inside of our environmental initiatives, inside our ESG push. But after we take preserving the lands as a very high priority, we want to see economic growth, economic development inside of these communities where we provide the services. And I personally believe that a large push needs to come from education and employment opportunities. I've caught a break or two in my life, and I do believe a lot of that was premised on the fact that I finished high school, I decided to go to university, I furthered my studies, I got some undergraduate degrees, which opened up doors into employment opportunities, and I've personally experienced the upside to that. I like to push the education and employment opportunities, which ultimately means that we're going to be pushing from a corporate perspective just that inside of our social initiatives, the education piece and the employment opportunities. Moving over to the next bullet point on the top right, we do take a multi-layered approach when speaking about specific Indigenous engagement initiatives. We take a four-layered approach with increasing degrees of monetary commitment. And so these 4 layers are donations into the community, revenue share agreements, working relationships, and then joint ventures where we really do see upside. We believe that if we do have joint investment, joint ownership in assets, oil field service assets, we do think there is large upside to both parties. From there, moving on to the third bullet point in the bottom left corner, as stated in our corporate, what we call our CSR report, our corporate social responsibility report, we definitely recognize efforts need to be followed up with measurable results. And I do believe that there's a lot of rhetoric when it comes to this part of any industry in the country, to be honest with you. Indigenous engagement, Indigenous issues, it starts hitting the media, it starts getting airtime. And I think a lot of companies feel obligated that they're supposed to make an announcement, start the rhetoric. And we believe that the rhetoric needs to be followed up with these measurable results. So again, this is a little bit on a general basis, and I apologize for keeping it high level. And I'm hoping to get into further details in the Q&A, but inside of the time restraints that inside of Northeast BC, we engage multiple communities inside of Northeast BC, which is the Montney Field, obviously one of the largest targets on the planet right now. And Precision operates, depending on the time of year, between 50 and 60% of the market share of the drilling rigs inside of Northeast BC. So we do find it very, very important, imperative that we engage in multiple communities throughout that region. We also provide well servicing operations, our oil field rentals, and our camps and catering throughout the region. Once we start moving east, there are communities throughout central and northeast Alberta that continue to be engaged to ensure that all parties are involved throughout the process. And again, I would love to get into some specifics in the Q&A, but I think it's important at this point just to make sure that everybody understands, as an oil field service provider, we're often guided by our E&P customers. And you know, they often will guide us towards some parties that, you know, they may present as a little bit more needing, but sometimes we just engage in a lot of groups that we simply share a lot of commonalities with. These commonalities being hard work, accountability, and again, coming back to our high performance, high value visions and priorities and rules. Once we do engage in the communities that share some of these values, we find it very easy to work with these people, to work with the community. Again, no matter where you come from, no matter where you are in the country or on the planet, we are cognizant that we need to be aware of where those members of the community are coming from, and we enjoy taking it on to ensure that our operation can continue on. So again, I apologize for I know my time's up. I want to apologize for keeping it rather general, but I am looking forward to some of the Q&A, and just with that, I'll conclude my piece and pass it on to my next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I'm looking forward to digging a little bit more into the initiatives and the real-time results that you've seen with precision drilling. So the next presenter we have is Adi. He's a consultant bringing organizations to the digital front, and he's a dedicated volunteer of many causes. Adi believes in solutions that consider all perspectives, dismantle systems promoting inequality and injustice, and solutions that are impactful and long-lasting. Adi is an ambassador with Water Movement, and I'll pass it on to him, where he will give a 10-minute presentation.
All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, you're good.
Great, thank you. So I'll get started. Hello and welcome to this presentation about Water Movement. I would like to begin by thanking you, Uwe, for that wonderful land acknowledgement, and Ubita for that introduction. It's great to see some of the perspectives already shared. Thank you, Jeff, for that. And I think I'm the only one here today not representing industry, but I'm sure you will appreciate our perspectives as well. Like many of you on this virtual platform today, I too am joining from Mohkinstsis, which can be found on settler maps, known as the city of Calgary. Thank you, SPE, for inviting me, and I'm thrilled to be here today and talk to you about Water Movement and the movement that we are creating. Water Movement has come together thanks to the joint effort of industry professionals and university students who are passionate about making change against the unforgivable reality of far too many Indigenous communities not having adequate access to clean water. Our focus is on those who are on the first defense against water advisories in their communities, the silent heroes of the water world, and those who are actually solving the problem. If you haven't guessed already who I'm referring to, it is the water treatment operators. And so, our vision is to provide an online space that is collaborative and engaging for Indigenous water treatment operators to connect on, share lessons learned, and access a video learning library. To achieve this vision, we are on a mission to bridge the connection between Indigenous water treatment operators from coast to coast to coast. In addition to this resource, the Water Movement platform provides an interactive collaboration space for those in the industry. We also seek to raise awareness amongst the next generation of water leaders. Allow me to elaborate a little bit about these three areas. Like a YouTube channel or playlist, the video learning library features an array of learning videos that are led and demonstrated by expert Indigenous operators, whether it's giving you information about troubleshooting or providing best maintenance practices or even teaching you theory. You'll find something to watch and something to learn from. We exclusively feature Indigenous experts because operators want to hear from those who can relate to their struggles. Let's take a look at one of these videos.
When you run into a problem like a pump won't start or something, sometimes just a simple breaker. So these are my little breakers. And if one of them is tripped, they'll actually be sticking out. And it's just a matter of pushing the breaker in and the system starts running again.
So you just saw Warren Brown from Lytton First Nation explain how simply checking if your breakers are working or not can help overcome a vital operation of a pump not working. He's the operations and maintenance manager for his community's water plant and someone who's actually lifted his community from water advisories in the past. The collaboration zone is similar to a forum. Operators can start conversations here, seek advice from other operators, and even spotlight experts who's helped them out. The collaboration zone can also provide us with very useful information. For example, often communities are not connected and face very similar issues. The same problem has been solved elsewhere, but operators from different communities don't know. Here, they can find conversations or solutions that can help them overcome a challenge that has already been solved somewhere else. We can also see trends on what common issues our communities are facing, and data like that is always very, very useful. Outside of supporting current experts in the industry, we know the importance of retaining new talent and ensuring we build the next generation of water leaders. Water Movement works to bridge the connection between students and the water sector by hosting technical and non-technical workshops, family science days. Here you can see several photos from our events. The family science day is actually one of my favorites because we built edible water bottles, the little pods, that you can see in the top left of the screen. So you're probably wondering now, how did Water Movement come to be? Well, we began with data. The Government of Canada reports that 80% of water advisories come from equipment and processes failing. So we wanted to understand, why is this failure happening and what is the underlying cause? So we went on a journey to meet stakeholders from across the country and understand the issues further. We connected with Indigenous water treatment operators and experts to listen and learn from. And this took us over 3 years. Everything we learned about the challenges of the industry, of the operators, of their communities, all ultimately pointed us to building the platform you see before you, Water Movement. This past year, we filmed content for 100 new videos, and they're being released on all of our channels right now. We've connected with experts for more content, and we're covering not just technical topics, but also including culture, history, and tradition. The platform is seeing thousands of people engaging, and during our video library campaigns, the website sees 20% monthly increases in traffic. And we're not just seeing Canadians use the platform, but people from around the world. We anticipate thousands more operators utilize the platform in the coming months and years and add to the worldwide engagement we're seeing from over 24 countries. Even the Water Movement is not an advocacy group. We've taken to empower Indigenous operator voices, and thanks to the thousands of people supporting our campaigns, our movements have reached the highest offices of the government. We're even working with the Minister of Indigenous Services and their office to further our reach and our impact. For decades now, billions of dollars have been thrown at the water crisis. Countless solutions have been offered, and the issue is widely known, but it still exists. A reason Water Movement is successful is because we have remained true to the cause. We're putting power back into the hands of those who are actually solving the problem. Water Movement is making waves to end Canada's water crisis. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I invite you all to connect with Water Movement on all our platforms and get in touch. I look forward to answering any questions you may have in the Q&A period. Back to you, Vida.
Thanks so much, Adi. And as he mentioned, audience members, feel free to use the Q&A function to ask any questions for Adi's or Jeff's or Warren's or Trent's presentation, and we'll be answering them at the end of the presentations. So the next presenter we have is Trent. He is the Director of Community and Indigenous Affairs at Cenovus. Trent is responsible for leading Cenovus's efforts in working with Indigenous communities, municipal governments, and nonprofit organizations. This includes guiding the company's Indigenous business development, consultation and engagement, negotiating and implementing community benefit agreements, progressing the Indigenous Housing Initiative, the Employee Giving and Volunteering Program, and partnerships with nonprofit organizations. So without further ado, Trent, I see you've shared your screen and everything looks good, so I'll pass it on to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Beta, and thank you to the SPE for the invitation to talk about Cenovus's Indigenous engagement practices. I feel like it's already a bit of a win because we successfully got the presentation up, and you always worry about whether the technology is going to work, so we've got that working for us already. I'll spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about Cenovus, but I want to make sure I leave a lot more time in the presentation just to talk about the various ways that we're engaging with Indigenous communities. But it is important first to take a step back and understand a little bit about our corporation. And we are a company that's gone through some significant change, particularly over the past 2 years. In October 2020, Cenovus announced that it was coming together with Husky Energy. And to say that transformed the company would be a severe understatement. We went from being a company with, I think, under 3,000 employees to a company with 6,000 employees, a company that was predominantly focused on production in northeastern Alberta to an international company that has upstream, downstream, offshore production and is fully integrated. The other transition that occurred as a result of that is it also dramatically changed how many Indigenous communities the company works with. So prior to the coming together of the two companies, Cenovus worked with approximately 20 different communities, and following the deal with Husky, we now routinely deal with more than 40. So it dramatically changed how we engage the communities, but in no way did it change our strategy. That part has been consistent. So in looking at just a little bit about how we engage communities, I mean, if there was one slide that I could speak to and speak to nothing else, this would really be it. This is really a snapshot of our strategy in terms of all of the different ways that we engage with Indigenous communities. And I would say for the most part, I've been with the company for 16 years, and each of these pieces in one form or another has been largely intact for that entire time. Now, sometimes the effort that you're placing in each one of these focus areas may change depending on business needs or depending on community needs, but each one of them has been very consistently applied wherever we operate. And this is really founded on our commitment as a company to be a responsible operator. We very much view that when we're going to be operating in an area, we would like communities to feel that they are better off as a result of us being there. We don't want to be an operator that people aren't happy to have next door. We want them, to be welcoming us into that area, and we know that we have to earn that trust and respect in order to do that. So I will touch a little bit on each of these just to give you a sense for what it is. And so the first one that I'm going to start with is business development. And I would say if I look back 16 years ago to the first meetings and engagements that I had with the community on behalf of the company, I completely underestimated the importance of business development. If there's one thing that I've learned over the past 16 plus years, is it's the importance of what is now economic reconciliation. And that most communities, while they may have a lot of questions about the development that is occurring next door, and rightfully so, there's always a significant interest in how they can benefit and how can they integrate into the various types of services that we need as a company so that they can actually provide for their communities over the long term. Business has also been one of the pillars in terms of how we have engaged communities. It's been one of our biggest successes. Since we started tracking our Indigenous business spend since it was December of 2009, where we really started to aggressively track our performance and set objectives to how we wanted to do in that space, we've spent over $3 billion with Indigenous businesses. And so it has been a very core part of how we work with communities. The next one is on the employment front. And so second to business, we would also find a lot of interest in how do we work? How do we work for your company, or how do we work for the different service providers? And so in that space, we have an employment program, which I would say is the centerpiece of our employment efforts. And what makes it different is it's a training to employment program. So we recruit students from the surrounding communities. We put them in a program. You stick with the program. At the end of that, you get a job. It's not a training program where at the end you get training. Then the community say, well, where's the job? And you say, well, there isn't one. No, there's a job at the end. If you stick with the program, it leads to employment. The other part is the long-term agreements. So we have more than 20 long-term benefit agreements with various Indigenous communities, predominantly in our oil sands regions. And the reason that it's in the oil sands region more than others is just the size and duration of the projects. And so that was something that we started to do as soon as we started expanding our major oil sands projects. So generally, those agreements include provisions for how the community can benefit, how we're going to engage one another, and how we're going to solve any problems that inevitably will emerge as they do in any relationship. And of course, there's consultation. So I would look at this as more of a regulatory requirement, but also respecting community processes. So anytime we do any major developments, expansions, exploration on any of our projects that are on Crown land, we want to make sure that we're engaging the community meaningfully, making sure that we understand their interests in what it is that we're doing so that we can make any adjustments needed. Relationship building is really that all-inclusive piece that we do, that don't just go to a community when you want something. You go there to be a part of those communities and build those lasting relationships. And then, of course, there is the investment initiatives that we do to support different social investment initiatives in the community. Off to the side, and there's a reason why it's not in the circle, is a relatively new initiative that we launched in January 2020, and it's our Indigenous Housing Initiative. So at the time, and this still holds true, this was the single largest social investment initiative in the history of our company. It's a $50 million commitment to build up to 200 homes in 6 Indigenous communities adjacent to our oil sands projects. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that one a little bit later in the presentation, because it's certainly one of the pieces that we consistently get a lot of questions about, because it is a pretty unique program. So carrying all of that forward, and I would say too, the other thing that I want to make sure that I touch on is guiding all of those pieces inside the company. We have support from the company's most senior leadership, from the executive through to every level in the organization. And we have an Indigenous Inclusion Advisory Committee in place that is comprised of 10 of the company's most senior leaders that help guide all of our initiatives and all of our work in all of those focus areas, up to and including the establishment of our ESG focus areas. So this ESG focus area, we launched these 5 focus areas officially in December of last year. We went through a process of talking with our board of governors, senior leadership in the company, various political organizations, different stakeholders, investors, and through that came with a materiality assessment of which are the things that are most material that they would like to see us focus on in our ESG strategy. Indigenous reconciliation came back as one of those, and not surprisingly at all that it did. And so within that, we've set an objective to spend a minimum of $1.2 billion with Indigenous businesses from 2019 to 2025. And the key word within that is actually a minimum. We treat that as the floor and not the ceiling, which is really, I think, a critical point within that is that we think that we can actually exceed that, and we're certainly well on our way to doing that. The second piece within that is to attain gold certification in progressive Aboriginal relations from the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business. So the CCAB, to my knowledge, is the only third-party validation in Canada that will come in and do an assessment of your Indigenous reconciliation practices and then grade you on how you're doing in bronze, silver, or gold level, and identify gaps for improvement. So we are aspiring to achieve gold certification in that, and we are already have that process underway. So the last little bit that I want to talk about is the Indigenous Housing Initiative, and I'll just provide some explanation onto what it is and why we did it. And then I'm going to finish up my talk with just a video, because I think video is gonna tell you a lot more than any words that I can explain. But really, what this was about is every Indigenous community in Canada, I think you could safely say, has a housing challenge. It's actually devastating in many of those communities. In some of the communities that are part of our housing initiative, when we scope this out, they have a homelessness rate of upwards of 30% in some cases. And what I learned in evaluating this was that homelessness in most of those communities look dramatically different than what most of us might think about in Calgary, where we think of people on the streets or on, in homeless shelters. In those communities, the communities don't turn their back on friends and family. So what it might mean is they don't have a residence. But as one of the chiefs from the community said to me, he said, we couch surf. We'll go from one home to the next, but maybe we don't have a permanent residence. And in some of the communities, as many as 30% of their residents would be described as homeless. So in a tour and meetings with the communities with our CEO, housing came up as the biggest challenge that they were facing. And following that meeting, Alex, who was our CEO, said, we have to do something about this. And so we did. And so following those discussions, working with those communities, we launched the initiative in 2020. We've built 45 homes already, which was a tremendous challenge during the pandemic. And we have 46 more planned for this year, with our end goal being we hope to have built 200 homes in those communities. So I'm just going to quickly move forward, and I'm going to share a video with everybody. Then this is my last slide. So just want to leave you with parting thoughts on the Cenovus Indigenous Housing Initiative that we're very proud of.
We're getting to the point where we have 2 families living in a house someplace 3 already. We have another, the demand for another 50 houses.
A lot of our memberships left Reserve years ago because of the housing crisis, and now they're elderly. We would like to bring them back home. We got a lot of people that went to post-secondary schools that are now able to come back home to work for the nation. But like I said, we got no place to put them, so it's always ongoing.
Cenovus is committing $10 million a year over the next 5 years to help build homes in the 6 communities represented by the leaders beside me here. I am proud to say that this is by far the largest community investment that Cenovus has ever made in its history. And we're hoping that this investment initiative is going to result in the construction of at least 200 new homes. We really want the communities, they're going to build these homes, they're going to maintain these homes. Our hope is that we will get this really significant added benefit of that training that people are going to be able to take on in the future in their lives.
And that is it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Trent, for the presentation and for the video. It was really exciting to see the progress you guys have had. We will just continue to our last presenter. And again, everyone, just a friendly reminder to use that Q&A chat box to ask questions. So our last presenter is Warren. Warren is a member of Siksika Nation of Treaty 7 and is the EVP of Engineering and Project Reconciliation. Having degrees in physics and mechanical engineering, he has practiced as a petroleum engineer for more than 28 years. So Warren, I see you're sharing your screen and I'll let you get started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Great discussions, panelists. Thank you very much for sharing what you had there. So I've been with this Project Reconciliation for about a year now, and it's been a great experience. Project Reconciliation has been around for approaching, it'll be 4 years actually this year. And Trent, I'll share with you that we have sort of a common touch point, I think, because we were actually initiated on the strong urging of Rob Peabody back in his Husky days. So just pre-Synovus there. So what I want to do here in the next few minutes is just introduce everybody to who is Project Reconciliation, or PRI, and essentially what we're up to. So we're a relatively small but very experienced, professionally diverse team. Pretty deep financial experience, actually. There are a couple of engineers on the team. I'm one of them, and we're not a government initiative. We're not a pipeline company. We really were formed to, I would say, focus on the truth and reconciliation call to action number 92, which out of those 94 calls to action, that's the one that focuses on the business community and its relationship with Canada's Indigenous communities. So don't really have a slide on that one, but that really speaks to, when you look it up, speaks to free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous communities before development. It speaks to Indigenous communities' long-term sustainable benefits from development on their traditional territories. So I think this is a good slide. We certainly use this with our Indigenous community discussions to explain what we're all about. So we were born, and probably our largest project, and that's the way we view these various initiatives that we work on, or projects, is actually the purchase of Trans Mountain Corporation. So of course, that's the Trans Mountain expansion project that's currently underway. That impacts 129 Indigenous communities that are proximal to that pipeline route from Edmonton to Burnaby, and even the nations on Vancouver Island. So once that's accomplished, of course, pipelines generate dividends. The Indigenous communities would be the owners of the company, so they would be the recipients of the dividends. What we have additionally been building out to ensure the sustainability of that investment is the mechanisms to be able to reinvest it, and to reinvest it into energy transition focused projects. So these would be the projects of the Indigenous Sovereign Wealth Fund, which would also be owned by the Indigenous communities. So they would, of course, receive benefits over time from that, from the business of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Now, these projects, they tend to be a pretty large footprint. The projects, and I'm talking about the energy transition focused projects, and they take a good amount of effort to initiate. So that's the business of Reconciliation Energy Transitioning, or REDI. So This, like I say, this tends to be a good slide for just showing the sort of the cycle that we're setting up here. The end goal is really to build out Indigenous economic sovereignty, and by that I mean Indigenous wealth over sort of a multi-generational scale. These projects of READI are projects that would bring together various partnerships between corporate Canada and project impacted Indigenous communities. So we bring those parties together. We also work to bring the project financing to make that happen. So essentially for these Indigenous communities to step into these projects as a material equity partner. So, typically what happens with Indigenous participation in projects is they're brought into projects, the communities are brought into projects, perhaps at FID or final investment decision point. Perhaps they're brought into the projects once they're commercial. So what we're doing here is a little different than that. Our typical project would actually see an entry point as the project is initiated. So a couple of examples is, outside of the pipeline, Trans Mountain Corporation example, a couple of examples of ready projects that neither one of them is at final investment decision at this point, are Shell's Atlas CCS project in the Edmonton Heartland region, where we're working with several Indigenous communities that are, I would call them project impacted. They're, proximal to a very large area of interest that will be used for sequestration. And another project is actually an operated project that we're proposing, which is another CCS project, not in the Heartland region. So in that case, we would be bringing in another corporate partner and actually ourselves working to advance that project through the early phases. It's probably the bulk of my time right now is actually spent on that other CCS project. We're also looking at biofuels. We would look at wind, solar projects, etc. So as these projects move through to final investment decision, which is all of that front end, could be a couple of years of work, right? That goes, that sees the front end engineering and design done, gets the projects to the point where they're a lower risk, and essentially carries the Indigenous involvement through to that point. And then we look to advance the project through construction and actually get it to commercial on stream. So READI, or Reconciliation Energy Transition Inc., just to summarize what I've just said, really is there to fund these initial projects, to help understand and manage the startup risk, and to bring these projects through to the point where they're stood up and operational, and then that ownership transitions to the Indigenous communities. And I've put in the Indigenous Sovereign Wealth Fund here as a project financing, but we, would look to, various financing sources for that, that there are a number of options out there. Allocation is probably one key differentiator between ourselves and some of the other approaches that have been taken to these projects. So what we look, where our opportunities start, as far as bringing in the Indigenous community participation, is essentially having an understanding of which Indigenous communities are impacted by the projects, whether they are sort of a have or a have not sort of nation, because there's a lot of variety that you'll find out there in financial capability, in business sophistication. So we kind of really try and look beyond that and bring in all of the project impacted communities for equity participation. This particular slide is very tailored towards the pipeline side of the business, so the Trans Mountain side. And the way to interpret this is, we'll have this annual cash flow that's coming off of the assets. Some of that distribution will go directly to the participating Indigenous communities. Some of the Indigenous communities we have found in our discussions may elect not to participate in that particular project, in the Trans Mountain project. So we would hold their distributions in trust. And over time, should they elect to participate, then they essentially get their voice at the table at that point from a governance perspective. And sorry, I don't have a governance slide here, but that's another big part of that side of the business. Contributions to this Indigenous Sovereign Wealth Fund are essentially voluntary on the part of the participating communities, but what we see with the financial modeling is a substantial increase in value, even well beyond what comes off of the pipeline by itself, because of the increased business opportunities that the fund is participating in. So that's really it for the material. This is sort of the summary slide, but what we're really bringing to these communities is just ensuring that they get an economic benefit from the use of their traditional lands. And I think an important point to mention from the corporate development standpoint for our partners is this may very well, we certainly expect, would lead to timely development of these projects. So that's it for my slides. Happy to answer any questions that the group may have.